Thanks for listening to the Conscious Diva podcast. I'm Tatiana, and today on the pod, I'm joined by Jeremy David Engles, author of the new book, Mindful Democracy, a thought-provoking and deeply timely exploration of what it means to bring awareness, compassion, and presence into our collective life. Jeremy's work is inspired in part by the teachings of Thích Nhất Hạnh. In this conversation, we explore what democracy truly is and what it isn't. We also dive into the distinction between mindfulness as a practice and Buddhism as a path. Jeremy shares how even the smallest shifts, like cultivating an inner smile, can soften reactivity and open the door to deeper connections. And we touch on the beautiful and transformative practice of metta, or loving kindness meditation, as a way of relating to ourselves, to others, and even to those we struggle with. I hope you enjoyed this episode and feel inspired to share it. You can also subscribe, leave a review, or watch the full episode on YouTube. Thank you so much for listening. Jeremy, it's lovely to meet you and to have you here to talk about your new book on mindful democracy.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is great.
Yeah, and so firstly, so I do always read the books. Yours was actually the very first one that I listened to
Oh,
on Audible because when I started reading it, I was reading it in bed at night and I found the fonts really small.
it is small. Yeah, it's true. It's true.
So I
Yeah.
was like, And then I was sitting down like in the daylight the next day. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna sit down in the daylight. And then I was still like, oh my gosh, I'm really, my vision's not that bad, And so then I on the weekend, it was the spring equinox and I was
Mm,
cleaning my altar. Which is not the space behind me, but I did a big clean of everything and removed all of my deities and murtis and the crystals and all of that, and just dusted all of the incense dust and the rice grains and everything.
mm,
And I thought this is a perfect moment actually to listen to your book since it's about
oh,
mindfulness. And
yeah.
it actually was really wonderful to have that playing for the 3 hours that it took me to
Good.
clean my altar.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
it's
it's
wonderful.
actually, I mean, I wrote it in part to be read aloud.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so I think the audio recording that they did was quite nice.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Having not spoken to you before and being familiar with your voice, I think the reader did a great job because often when you know what the person sounds like and you listen to
right.
their book and I get disappointed when it's not them. Like, what? It's
Yeah.
not like
Yeah.
But yeah, it was complimentary and it sounded
Good.
like he also understood the teachings because that can also come across in the narration as someone potentially not really uh wrapping their head. They're just reading as a script. I was a TV producer for years, so you can hear the difference. I'm like, aha,
Of
that
course.
person's reading a script.
Yeah.
They're not embodying what it is. But let's begin with the difference between mindfulness and Buddhism, because one is
Mm,
a path and the other we could consider a practice.
yeah. Yes. So a lot of times people will ask about what's the difference between mindfulness and meditation. And so I think of meditation as being a broader category and mindfulness being a kind of meditation. So I can think of kinds of meditation that are not mindfulness meditations, but not kinds of meditation or mindfulness that aren't meditation. And mindfulness grows out of this beautiful, rich Buddhist path. And I really understand Buddhism to be a path of practice. So, for me at least, Buddhism is less about saying, believe this and it will set you free, which some religious paths say, and that's fine. But much more about saying, try this out and see if it helps. And one of the things that the Buddha and his students have offered us is this practice of mindfulness. And I love Buddhism because it's so adaptable. I mean, it really is a global religion. And every place that it's found a home, it's had its own unique flavor. And one of the things that is interesting about Buddhism, especially as it's lived in like the United States and Europe as well, is that there are many forms of what we might consider to be secular Buddhism, without ritual or even without any understanding of gods or anything like that. And a lot of the mindfulness that we encounter today grows out of that secular Buddhist practice. And so I tell my students that mindfulness comes from Buddhism, but isn't constrained by what we understand Buddhism to be.
And so you reference Thich Nhat Hanh
Yeah.
in your book quite a bit. Did you ever meet him? Was he a teacher of yours?
I never had the opportunity to meet him in person, but I very much consider him to be a teacher of mine. In 2018, I had the life-changing privilege of going on a pilgrimage in India and Nepal to walk in the footsteps of the
Mhm.
Buddha. And
Mm.
it was a pilgrimage that was led by two of the senior lay students of Thich Nhat Hanh, and amazing people. If you have the opportunity to go, you should. Oh, it's just life changing.
I did a similar pilgrimage in 2022, I want to say, 2022.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when you have yeah,
Yeah. Oh, that's
please.
wonderful. Yeah. So we got to visit, Sarnath, where the Buddha gave his Four Noble Truths, and the deer park there, and I got the opportunity to sit in meditation under the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, and on a festival day. So there were monks from all over the world in different color robes, circumambulating the stupa, chanting in different languages, and oh,
So
what a
auspicious. Wow.
transcendent experience.
Mm.
It was beautiful. And I also had the opportunity to sit on top of Vulture Peak, which is one of the places that the Buddha loved. There's a cave he loved to meditate there, and watch the sun set over the valley while chanting the Heart Sutra with Buddhist monks. And it was such a beautiful experience. And in that moment, I felt just this real deep kinship with this tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh and the Plum Village global tradition. And so I've considered myself to be a student of that tradition since then. And he was just a remarkable person, a remarkable spiritual teacher. This year actually would be the 100th anniversary of when he was born, if he was still alive with us. And but he believed that Buddhism should really adapt to the local traditions of wherever it happened to find a home, and that we should take from that tradition what we find useful, and the aspects of that tradition that maybe we don't find so useful, leave them behind. Just a magnificent teacher.
And I feel like because of that approach, it made sense for the West.
Yeah,
Because the Westerners, we always need to understand everything.
yeah,
So when you can just
yeah,
simplify and take what feels, what resonates, then there's a deeper experience, I think, for the person than having to kind of really attach or detach or classify a religion or get into
yeah,
any of the dogma. So I think, and that's probably why it's been so popular over the decades.
yeah. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That was, I think for Buddhism to adapt to the West, North America and Europe, it had to learn to speak the language of science, which it very clearly does today. I mean, you find that mindfulness lives in medical schools, it lives in hospitals and whatnot. A lot of the research that's being done today on mindfulness is really focused on individual well-being and healing. And so I think that's one of the conditions that gives rise to this beautiful practice that we have today. But I think that there's also something really beautiful and important about recognizing the Buddhist roots of the practice, because for a lot of people that I encounter today, mindfulness is often taught as, it's being really solely about the self, about individual well-being, about individual healing. But in the broader Buddhist context and history, mindfulness isn't just about the self, it's about all of us. And it's not just about learning how to be calm in the midst of a world on fire. It's about learning how to actually transform things,
Mhm.
to transform that world. And Thich Nhat Hanh talked a lot about how the bodhisattva, the person who embodies love and compassion, feels that for all beings, not just themselves. And that's something I feel really deeply in my own personal practice is this sense of love for all living beings. And I think it's partly why I've been so interested in democracy, actually.
Let's talk about that, your book then,
Yeah.
because so what is democracy and what isn't it?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think a lot of what we see in the way that mindfulness is taught, or the way that democracy is talked about today, I would say really isn't democracy. So, I ask my students, I'm a professor at the university. I teach classes on democracy and helping my students get
You must be a
prepared to
great
be
teacher, by the way.
citizens.
You must be
Oh.
so amazing to be like.
I love teaching. I feel what a blessing it is to have found your calling in life. Just like something that you feel deeply passionate about, but something that you're good at as well. And I love teaching. And when I ask my students what democracy is, a lot of them don't care about it, but they'll say, well, it's elections. It's every 4 years we vote in an election. And that sense of democracy is such a weak and thin definition of democracy. But this sense of like two political parties battling it out for elections and for donations and for money, this sense of politics is a war or a battle, and us as citizens are supposed to enlist on one side or the other. Not only is that a bad way to organize politics, I think it's just really corrosive of our spirit. And so in my book, I try to recuperate and offer a very different vision of democracy. And so I define mindful democracy in the book as a communal practice. So it's something that we practice, so which means we can get better at it. But it's something we practice together in community, a communal practice of working together to care for ourselves, for other people, and for the life that we share. So,
Mhm.
democracy on this level is a practice of care. How we work together to care for the sorrows that arise in our life, to cultivate the joys that arise in life, but also to confront the kinds of injustice that are very much out there in the world. So that's really how I'm thinking about democracy.
Well, so explain what it is it not,
Yeah, I
please.
don't think democracy is a war, I guess. Democracy is not a battle between two political parties. Instead, it is us as human beings learning how to work together locally on a grassroots level, standing on common ground to take care of each other and ourselves and this thing that we share, this miracle life.
So how does that begin within? If you don't have a spiritual practice, that doesn't matter. But how can we
Yeah.
cultivate this from within to actually be empathetic?
When I teach mindfulness practice, a lot of traditional meditation texts will talk about mindfulness as having two parts or two aspects. And you all know what a snow globe is, obviously, right? I got my little meditation bell. Like if it's like a snow globe and you shake it up, everything gets really cloudy because there's stuff in the snow globe that gets kicked up. I think that's the state our minds are in most of the time. Really busy, really cloudy, really all over the place. We're pulled this way and that. Our social media feeds are a flood of bad news and anger and resentment, and we're off balance. And it's really difficult to, act caringly when we're in that state. And so the first part of mindfulness practice is really learning how to slow down and allow things to settle. So it's like setting that snow globe down on a table and all the stuff that's been kicked up settles to the bottom. And then the snow globe is clear. I think we have to be able to learn how to do that, to be present for ourselves, to be present for other people, to see things as they really are with clarity if we're going to practice democracy. But then the second part of mindfulness practice in a lot of traditional texts is looking deeply or seeing clearly or insight. So the word we use is vipassana, and there's lots of vipassana meditations, of course, around the country, around the world. And what do we see when the snow globe settles? And we look at things clearly, we begin to see just how interconnected everything is. We're conditioned to experience the world as individuals, as though we're separate from trees or the air or rain or cats or other people.
Hmm.
But actually, when we really slow down and look deeply, we see that everything is changing and it's changing together in this really beautiful cosmic constant dance of individuals and ensembles. And Thich Nhat Hanh did such a beautiful job of teaching about this. He called it interbeing, that all being is, in fact, interbeing. And he gave the example of a table, and he would talk about how a table is made up of wood. It's made up of nails and glue. It's made up of blueprints, and it's probably made up of a carpenter's labor, or maybe today it's like a machine labor, but a lot of tables are still made by carpenters. If you took any one of those aspects of the table out, so let's say you took the wood out of the table and you returned it to the trees, or if you took the rain away and it didn't nourish the trees so that they could grow, so that they could become wood to become the table. Or if you took the nails out and you melted them back down and returned them to the earth. Or if you took the carpenter out, and maybe that carpenter didn't exist, or maybe that carpenter chose a different line of work because he or she had a teacher that inspired them to do something different. Take any one of those aspects away, the table does not exist. Human beings are exactly the same way. Take an aspect out of us, out of this interconnected, interdependent life, and we're not the same anymore. And so I think that the practice of inner transformation that's necessary for mindful democracy, and it starts with inner transformation, it really does, is awakening to this sense of interconnectedness, of interdependence, and starting to begin to notice connections where we used to just see separation.
Hmm. Well, it's such a beautiful concept, and it's true. But a lot of people really struggle with deep listening,
Yeah.
inner listening, because of
Oh,
just
yeah.
the modern world we're in, right? With our phones, and we're so, you just said we're conditioned, right, to just be
Yeah.
distracted.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, particularly in this the younger generation of people, since tablets and phones
Sure.
evolved into mini computers. We're just constantly distracted, and the
Yeah.
content that's fed to us is designed to do that. So how then can a person, and some people are really addicted to their phones, needing to know what's next, did someone
Yeah.
reply, all of these things. So how then can they first begin to trust their intuition, to hear, to
Yeah.
understand the feelings that you're feeling when you maybe go for a walk, you walk your dog and you didn't
Yeah.
bring your phone, or you are spending time
Yeah.
in nature, or whatever it is, those quiet moments. Some people even bring their phones into their showers now, and they're never away
Yeah.
from them, right? And
Yeah.
often the shower, I'll say to my own clients, is a great place to like hone in, like let the negative ions in the water affect you,
Oh, yeah.
like open you up, because there's something that's happening there. You'll to your
Yep.
to your consciousness with water, with the steam. So
It's like the most creative place in the world. It's just like the shower, right?
Right? You get all
Oh,
these
yeah.
downloads, they just come to you. Oh, I forgot to
Yep.
call that person who I haven't seen in 6 months. Or,
Yep.
suddenly you remember a note in your pocket because you didn't have your phone that day, and they wrote down a number on a piece of paper on a napkin, and you were like, oh, it's in that thing. Or, divine inspiration of some amazing idea, or, the words for your book. I don't know, just all kinds of
Yeah.
things come in the
Yeah.
shower.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. there are practices that we can cultivate to become less addicted, less dependent on our devices. And there are lots of meditation teachers who are offering really wonderful practices out there. But what's the inspiration to want to be different, to do things differently? And I feel like that's where we can really help our students actually is to help them recognize that a distracted, overwhelmed life is not actually the life that they want to lead. And so with a lot of my students, we'll start by, doing some journaling and doing some deep contemplation and consideration of like what actually makes them happy.
Are you giving them prompts for this, or are you
Yeah,
making? Okay.
absolutely. Yeah. And you know, what are the things in your life that make you happiest? When are the moments you feel most at ease, most like yourself? What are the moments where you feel the most safe? And it's interesting to just see students kind of wrestle with this because not all, but a lot of students will come back to I'm happiness when I'm with my friends or when I'm with my family or when I'm with my partner or when I'm with my pet or something like that. And that then becomes like just a little opening that allows for insight. Well, if you're happiest when you're with people that you care about and that you love, but you're not actually with them because you're in your phone. What's happening there? I don't know. I feel like meditating on what makes us truly happy, what makes us truly joyful, creates some openings potentially. Almost no student says they're truly happiest when they're making comments on TikTok. They might
Mhm.
like scrolling through videos and things like that, but they recognize that it's not like true happiness or true joy. There's a depth of experience that's just lacking in those moments. So, if I can help my students, to recognize that about themselves and hear students in meditation sangha and yoga classes at the university, then we can start to work on thinking about, all right, how about you put your phone in a different room or at least across the room from you when you sleep so that it's not the first thing that you grab in the morning? How about you try this week not to take your phone into the shower? That's a new one. I hadn't heard that one before. What would it mean to just go for a 10-minute walk outside without your phone?
Hmm.
And then come back and realize, did the world end while you were away? And I don't know. I feel like as a meditation teacher, my job is really to empower my students, not to like scold them. And I think of this as a university teacher too. And so empowering students into more freedom, I think, is the way that we go.
Two thoughts just came to
Yeah.
mind. One, do they ask you, well, can I use my phone and download a meditation app? Is that cheating? And then the other one is like, how many of the students say I can't meditate?
Oh, sure. Almost all students say they can't meditate initially. And I think it's because there's a misperception about what meditation is. And
100%. Mhm.
I've had that misperception in my own life too. When I really first started on this path of meditation, it was through deep studies of yoga. And, I studied in India, in Chennai. I had this false perception that meditation meant sitting in perfect stillness with no thoughts in my head, beyond the opposites, as just like, this tranquil being. But it's actually impossible to sit in perfect stillness because our hearts are always beating and our lungs are breathing. And that's a good thing because if our hearts weren't beating and our lungs weren't breathing, we would be dead. And so there's always movement, but our minds are also made to think, and that is not a bad thing at all. Like we need more thinking in the world, like good thinking, deep thinking. So I realized, especially once I began on the path of mindfulness, realizing that actually meditation can mean changing the relationship I have with movement and stillness, or changing the relationship I have with the thoughts that arise or the feelings that arise. in my body and in my mind. So I feel like some of the work initially that almost always has to be done is to demystify what meditation is, to help students realize that they probably already are practicing mindfulness. They just don't know it and they don't realize it, but they're doing it when they're doing things that they really love and care about, and they're really like focused on that.
Yeah,
So we can
it's being
build.
in the flow state.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. Yeah. I mean, if that's not mindfulness, I don't know what is. And that, just as an aside, is one of the things I love most about asana, yoga practice, is being able to get into that flow state. And just like everything else drops away. It's beautiful. It's recharging.
Yeah, so you're
And
a yoga teacher too. So,
I am.
okay,
Yeah.
so just as a quick little, sidebar.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, do you teach yoga? You go to a studio, but do you also do it ever in the class with at the university? You're at the University of Pennsylvania, right?
Penn State. Yeah, my wife and I and another friend own a yoga studio actually in the town where we live. So we started a yoga studio 10 years ago. Actually, this year, August will be our 10-year anniversary. And I teach yoga unplugged on Sunday mornings, which is a class where we really take the opportunity to unplug from everything and just be present in our bodies with our breath and move. And then I lead meditation after that. And I love the combination of yoga. And I mean, yoga itself is a practice of meditation. I mean, it's mindfulness in motion. But I love to practice asana, the physical postures of yoga or hatha yoga, moving and then sitting. Like, I love that combo. And I'm able to just have a deeper, richer, more insightful sit if I practice yoga first.
Yeah, and
Do you
same,
feel
and
that
that
way too?
yeah, that's because we're the energy's moving through our bodies and unblocking and we're opening up, we're expanding. So then when we sit, we can be vessels to receive
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
communication that needs to come down wherever whatever you're maybe you're setting an intention or wanting to
Sure.
figure something out or ask a question or have some sort of guidance, then you become this open vessel, this channel to receive that in a much
Yeah.
more profound way, but we have to move. And I think there's also a lot of misconceptions around the asana practice as well as
Oh, sure.
meditating. It's not a physical practice of exercising. It's not to get
Oh, it's
great
different than
abs.
that.
There's a
Exactly.
byproduct of what happens to the body as a result of these holding these
Mhm.
postures, but it's not the goal, right? It's not the aim.
I mean, it's a practice of, at least in some traditions, of tapas, right? Of burning away impurities. Yeah. I mean, it's just different than exercising at the gym. I love to exercise at the gym too, but I don't feel the same kind of spiritual renewal when I do that I do when I practice yoga. And I think a lot of it has to do with the intention we set, right, in our yoga practice. And then, the ability to practice together in community. At our yoga teacher training, we lead yoga teacher training each year and meditation teacher training, and we were talking about it this weekend, of just how powerful and beautiful it is to practice together in community, to feel that, you know, the shared breath, the shared energy, the shared intention, but also the shared support. And so a lot of my students, when they talk about how they can't meditate, we'll talk about meditating actually together and how we can support each other as we do that because everybody can meditate. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Everyone can meditate, but also everyone is so unique, which I think is
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
something that's often overlooked. One
Yeah.
practice might be right for someone else because they're super,
Yes.
visual and they're able to imagine
Yeah.
light coming through and, using a practice
Oh, yeah.
that is guided, or they're able to even just do it themselves. Other people enjoy mantra-based practice because that
Sure.
is very inspiring and activates, the body in a completely different way,
Yeah.
and the consciousness in a different way, and others just it is the stillness,
Yeah.
just but we're all so different. So I think understanding what is the right practice for you is really critical to actually
Absolutely.
enjoying. I always tell my clients that get a piece of paper and write down your shopping list. If you're really worried that that's where your mind's going to go, write it down beforehand. Like remind yourself, like, okay, laundry, got to go to groceries, like, because these little things
Oh,
arise,
yeah.
right? And then, oh,
Yeah.
that phone call. Okay, send those emails, okay, look at that, whatever, review that thing, so write them all down. So there they are, out of your head
Now
on a
they're
piece
out of
of
your head.
paper. You're going to
Exactly.
remember them, put them on a post-it, stick it on your laptop, you're done.
Yeah.
And then the other things that need to really come to the surface will arise. And it's
Yeah.
okay because there are often bigger things that we're processing. Perhaps you're going through an emotional change in your life. That's going to be on your mind. Let it come up so that you can actually receive the download for the how is the best way forward, right? Often I think we also mistake thoughts for inspiration that's coming
Hmm.
through, right? You
Hmm.
may have an idea that comes through, and that's because you're open in the moment. And so you're receiving an idea, or whatever it is, a problem solve, that's amazing, actually.
Hmm. Oh,
Mm,
yeah.
I think. But okay, so what's othering? You talk about othering
Sure.
as this like it is an enemy, but explain what that means.
Yeah. So do you mean enemyship in the
Yeah,
book?
enemyship in your
Yeah.
book. Yeah.
Yeah. So enemyship is a word that, as far as I know, Thomas Paine, who wrote this really important book called Common Sense in 1776, he coined this word enemyship. And so we're talking the same year as the Declaration of Independence. It's our 250th anniversary this year. And he was saying that the 13 colonies didn't really have friendship with each other because they were so different. But what they had was they had a shared enemy. So they had enemyship. And so enemyship is a relationship different than friendship because friendship is often about the things we have in common, our mutual care and love for each other. Enemyship is purely about sharing an enemy. So sharing someone that we fear, someone that we resent, someone that we hate. I think that enemyship has become one of the default ways that people bond today. And I think it's deeply encouraged by our political system is, we come together because there's this same figure, this shared enemy that we all have. Enemyship activates some of the worst parts of human beings, parts that that are very much a part of us, fear and othering and but it makes it impossible for us to work together across political divisions, across different life perspectives, life traditions, different ideas. It's very hard to work with enemies. But as I say in the book, we are enemies only in our minds. In reality, we're not enemies, actually, because life is a collaboration.
How can we move beyond that? I know we're talking about mindfulness and it's about
Yeah.
mindful democracy, but if that's like, I mean, we know where we are in
Yeah.
this country where we live today, you and I, and what's happening with conflict
Yeah.
in the world,
Yeah.
which stems very much from enemyship.
Yes.
So how can we, as we're watching this, where a lot of us, it's out of our control. What can
Yeah.
we do in this moment to get back to the Buddhist, aspect of suffering, working through our suffering,
Yeah.
but what can we do right now? Because a lot of people are really nervous and afraid and feel vulnerable and unsure of what's going to happen, in the next, like,
Yeah.
let alone tomorrow, but the next 6 months or the next
Sure.
two
Sure.
years.
Yeah. I mean, you know, the conditions for fear right now and anxiety are very real. And so what can we do? Well, I think one of the things that we can do is that we can recognize that the labels that we ascribe to people are not the sum total of who they are. So, you know, it's easy to label somebody as a Republican or a Democrat or a liberal or a conservative. And the minute a person has been labeled, like we feel like we know everything we need to know about that person
Mm.
because they're this. But those labels don't even begin to capture the complexity of who we are as human beings. And those labels often shut down our sense of connection and commonality. So, one of the things that I think is really important for us to do, and I think it is easiest to do on a local level, like that's one of the messages of the book is that we really have to come back to what's happening right here and right now in the places where we live, with the people that we live with in our communities. I think it's easier on the local level to begin to recognize that we actually do stand on common ground, that there are certain things that we share very deeply as human beings. In a world of enemyship, it seems like we're just so fundamentally different if we don't agree. But the fact that we don't agree doesn't mean that we can't get along or work together to make positive changes in the places that we live. And I think the other thing that we can do is recognize like how enemyship works. It's like a train almost, where like you hop on the train and it starts going faster and faster and faster. And the faster it's going, the harder it is to get off of the train. And so you almost have to like step off of the train right at the very beginning. So enemyship works through like three steps. The first step is to name an enemy. So whatever that enemy is, Iran or the Ayatollah, given the discourse that the Trump administration is pushing out right now, you name an enemy by amplifying all of the worst characteristics of that enemy and downplaying anything that makes them human. So they're, you know, evil, they're a monster, they're whatever it is. The second step is you deny that it's possible to have communication with the enemy. So you say that liberals and conservatives can't get along because we can't communicate, because we speak different languages or something like that. And it's really difficult to get along, to work together if we don't communicate. But when we do communicate, communication is all about community. It's about union. It's about community, right? We recognize actually how much we share. That's why it's so important for people who want to practice enemyship to deny communication. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. And then the third step, where the train really gets going so fast it's hard to jump off, is, I think of it as escalation. You say that there's a crisis, the enemy is going to strike right now, and we have no choice but to act. So we can't be present, we can't step back, we can't reflect, we can't be responsible because there's no time. And that's ultimately what enemyship says, is there is no time. But practicing mindfulness, we know there is always time. There's always the potential and capacity to slow down, to stop, to let things settle, to look deeply at things, and to see actually how much we share. So, for people who are feeling really vulnerable right now, and that vulnerability is real. I mean, there are people who are afraid of being deported, and that fear is rooted in real material conditions right now. I wish that it wasn't, but it is. This is when being part of a functioning, healthy, inclusive, diverse, vibrant community is so essential, because we can care for each other. We can take care of each other. We can help to protect each other. I was really inspired by the way that the people of Minneapolis responded to the things that were happening in their community. They responded mostly non-violently, not all, but mostly. But that's a community that really recognized the need and the responsibility to care for the people who are most vulnerable. And they stepped up to do it, even though it meant sacrifice. I think that's such a beautiful example of this, human capacity to care. Yeah.
And it doesn't just extend to the political environment,
No.
right? It often starts with our own lives, right?
Yes.
And how are we responding to a relationship scenario, right? Maybe someone's getting divorced, and it's very easy to paint a picture of the other person
Yeah.
as bad or all these other
Yeah.
things. And or in a workplace environment where maybe you're
Yeah.
having a strike, that's a very common scenario where you'll hear people talk about negatively, and not even realizing that what they're doing is perpetuating enemyship. It's like
Yes.
they're just complaining or whatever, but it can build and become quite toxic. And
Oh,
so if
yeah.
we're in this place of blame or pointing fingers and taking no ownership, and it's very easy to say, well, it wasn't my fault. It wasn't I didn't do that. It wasn't my fault. I got whatever, this happened. Or I was blamed for it. But that's
Yeah.
only a moment. While there may be truth to that, ultimately you have to take some responsibility and move through it and understand where can I grow. I think that's something that we don't want to hear the truth about ourselves, and we don't want to face truths, and we also don't necessarily think we need to grow, you know.
That's so beautifully said. Just such that was beautiful. I think that if we want to transcend enemyship, and I think that that's something we should want as a culture, as a global people. It starts in our everyday interactions with the people we're closest to, with the people at work, with our family, with our friends, with our neighbors. Every time we practice, say, loving kindness or metta meditation, it's like we're strengthening the heart muscle. Right. I found myself practicing loving kindness meditation and teaching it a lot recently.
Just
You
explain what
know,
that is, because I think people it's
sure.
a phrase that people maybe know or have heard of Sharon Salzberg, or maybe
Sure.
have
Yeah.
have heard. But just explain what that practice is. I know you break it down in your book.
Yeah. Yeah. So loving kindness meditation is such a beautiful practice and a lot of
And
mindfulness.
also what meta means, because that is
Oh,
not a
sure.
name that Facebook came up with.
That is true. It is. Yeah. So this is a METTA. And so double T and meta is a word that comes from ancient Indian languages, and it describes a kind of love that is like a universal love. So it's different than romantic love, right? Which is passionate, fiery love for a particular person. Metta is, like the love that we have for all living beings just because they're living beings. So that's very different than the Facebook meta. And
Almost the
but
opposite, actually.
almost the opposite, right? And and then loving kindness practice, it can take many forms, but usually it involves mantras that you repeat and you change the object of your focus or your intention with the mantras. And so the mantras are usually, if you start with yourself, which actually it's amazing how difficult a lot of people find it to practice love towards themselves. Self-love isn't easy, especially in this world where we're taught to be so hard on ourselves. So it can be really, really, really beautiful to practice just love towards yourself. And the mantras are usually like, may I be safe and happy. May I be free from inner and outer dangers. May I be well and at ease and genuinely happy. And the mantras take different forms. But the practice often starts by directing them at yourself. And then when you feel that sense of love towards yourself, extending it a little bit further outwards towards people you're really close to, where it's easy to extend love to them. And then extending it a little bit further out to maybe people in your neighborhood. Some of them you know, some of them you don't know. And then extending it a little bit further out to people in your community, and then a little bit further out. So it becomes more and more general. But the practice and the reason it starts with ourselves is we're strengthening that muscle so that that love doesn't lose any of its potency as you extend outwards. Because it's really natural to say, I love my community, but you don't really love your community because who's your community and what is that? But if you practice this kind of meditation and you actually really feel the same love that you feel for your partner or your pet for an anonymous person in the community, that's powerful. Like you've really strengthened your heart muscle in that case. So I think that that kind of practice is really central to mindful democracy. It's not easy to do that practice necessarily just by ourselves with like earbuds in or something like that. It's beautiful to practice it together as a community. And so one of the things I think that, really strong democratic communities do is actually create space where we can practice loving kindness together.
That's beautiful. And you have this section in your book, I think it was Insight 14,
Mm,
that talks about the smile. And I would just love you to just share that because it's hard to smile if you're not feeling happy. And you share a story about the Buddha, and we know, like always, the Buddha, if you look at any representation, he always has, he's not showing his teeth, doesn't mean he's not smiling, but there's like this slight upturned mouth, this quiet inner knowing.
yeah, there's so in the book, it's Insight 10,
Oh,
talking
is
about
it? Oh,
gratitude.
okay.
Yeah. And I have a gratitude practice in here. I love gratitude. It's such a beautiful practice. Keeping a gratitude journal is wonderful. It's ways of returning to the things that matter most to us and allowing the things that don't matter and are extraneous to just kind of drop away. And this meditation has a number of mantras. When I do it, I have a bell, and it's a beautiful meditation to practice together. But a lot of the mantras are like breathing in, I am grateful for this life. Breathing out, I smile at this life. And that smile, it maybe sounds kind of silly, I don't know, but it's not. It's such a powerful mindfulness practice, both because of the physiological effects of smiling, which are very real and powerful. But like you mentioned, when you look at statues of the Buddha, he almost always has this just like slight upturned knowing smile. It's not an arrogant smile in any way. It's just a smile of, I don't know, just recognizing how complicated and messy and wonderful and perplexing this life is and being so happy to be a part of it. And I think if we can feel that in our meditation practice, what a gift that is,
Mhm.
right?
And you can even experience that with like just in your day when you go out and maybe go into a store and to have to interact with,
Yeah.
maybe you're a student and you're walking through the halls and seeing other students. Just the simple act of smiling at somebody, not in like a weird, sleazy kind of, you know,
Right.
because
Right.
some
Right.
as because I think,
Yes.
I've got a 21 and a 16-year-old, so they're in a generation where making eye contact and smiling at somebody, something's up,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and they're
Yeah.
a little
What do
bit,
you want from me?
yeah,
Right.
or like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Are you
it's a
hitting on
strange,
me?
yeah, it's a
Something.
strange thing. It's not just and I've talked to them about this.
Mhm.
And so my
Yeah.
daughter yesterday, I played her that insight and your insight about it because
Yeah.
it's beautiful. And so yesterday she said, I actually practiced that at school. So she's in 11th grade.
Wow.
And she said in the classroom, I didn't realize how much especially when the kids are coming in and out, mate, you're in your zone, you're like packing up your books, you're preparing to leave the
Yeah.
class and go to the next room. And then other next students are coming in. So she said, my friend came in and I looked over at her and I said, hi, said hello and her name. And she right away looked up and went, hi, back to me.
Yeah.
And she said, I had this thought, wow, like, wow, I wasn't expecting that. And then they packed up and her friend set up. And then as she was leaving, her friend shouted out across the room, bye, have a great,
That's
and then she
awesome.
was in the like passing through a hallway, similar interaction with someone else, and then later in the day, something else. And she said, I didn't expect it to be immediate. And I'm like, well, of course it is, because you're reflecting. You see,
Yeah.
they're seeing in you, and what a beautiful gift you can give someone in their
Yeah.
day, because
Oh,
maybe, you're all in your heads. You're literally all in your heads and you're all doing your own thing. But when you can
yes.
look up and acknowledge someone else's existence with a nice smile and a hello, look what that does, because it's sent like it comes back to you. And she said, "Oh my God, I'm going to do that tomorrow." This morning when she left for school, I was like, "Okay, say hi, say hi to everybody,
Yeah, I love
And like,
it.
of course,
Oh,
don't be ridiculous about it, but like say.
yeah. It's amazing just I was thinking of there's a meditation that sometimes meditation teachers will do, like the intensely frustrating line meditation. So think of your experience when you're in a line somewhere and it's really, really, really frustrating. So like at a grocery store, or maybe you're stuck in traffic or something like that. And part of the meditation is just about recognizing the frustration and breathing with it and allowing it to dissipate. And one way that I change that with my students sometimes is if they're in an intensely frustrating line and they're feeling frustrated, turn around to the person behind you and smile at them. And see what happens. And a lot of times it turns into like a conversation, or it turns into like both of you just kind of looking at each other and just laughing about how frustrating it is. And then the line's not so frustrating anymore.
Mhm.
It's human connection. We need it.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
we do, and we don't have. We're
Yeah.
unfortunately in this time where it's so difficult for a lot of, especially young people,
Yeah.
to socialize and meet each other because they're all doing it through apps,
Yeah.
and there's zero human connection. There's nothing. It's like, okay, have you ever sat next to this person to feel their energy and see if they genuinely are, maybe you like them,
Yeah.
maybe you don't, maybe you want to spend time with this person. I say this to my son who's 21 all the time and he's at college. I'm like, you need to go out and meet people the old-fashioned way.
Right.
Like, there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that, like
Yeah.
you know how to talk. It's okay.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. 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 People, I think, are just out of practice, or maybe they were never in practice. I don't know. But
I know.
we uh we have those skills for sure, and we crave it, I think. I
Mhm.
mean, like we crave connection. People want to love and be loved. I just think
Yeah.
that's who we are. Yeah.
Well, so on that, okay, what is the Sangha? Because many people may not be familiar with this word. And
Yeah,
why is it
Sangha
important?
is a word that means community. So anytime you hear Sangha, you can just translate it as community. But it's usually a community of people who are practicing together. So it could be, you know, your yoga studio. If you go to a yoga studio and you're in a class with 5 other people or 30 other people or 50 other people, for that moment, you're a Sangha. You're a community of people who are practicing together. And you feel each other's energy, you draw strength from each other, you laugh together, you fall together, you breathe together. In the time that you're practicing together, you are not alone, even though you're engaged in your own individual practice. And that's the gift of Sangha, I think, is that all of us have to do this work ourselves. Like no one can do the inner work for us. And the work isn't easy always. I mean, it can be very challenging. It can also be very enjoyable and wonderful, but we don't have to do it alone. And it's so much better when we don't do it alone, when we can learn from each other, when we can practice together. And so that is a Sangha. And Thich Nhat Hanh talked about how there's a myth in Buddhism that in the moments when people most are out of alignment or in most disorder, a Buddha will come to show them a different way. So they call it the Buddha to come. And Thich Nhat Hanh said that the Buddha to come in the 21st century will be a Sangha. It will be a global Sangha. It won't just be one person. It'll be all of us practicing together. And I love that idea of, if there's going to be a spiritual revolution, a real true moment of inner transformation, we're going to do it together.
I think that's beautiful too. And there's 2 points on just the Sangha. Like while we're coming together as a community to practice
Yeah.
together and share whatever insights might be arising, uh,
Yeah.
emotional and also, elevated,
Yeah.
you mentioned that the practice, it is a singular practice, even though we're in a group together. So just talking to that point, like the spiritual path in the practices are
Hmm.
not like it's not a hack. There's
No,
no
no,
fast tracking. You
no.
know, and that's often where I think, and I might be wrong with this, everyone's experience is unique to them, depending on what your life experiences are. You know, there's when we're able to push through and recognize these challenges, our inner struggles, and recognize them as the truths that we need to face, that's when the beauty of these practices really come into their own, because then we're really expanding. But before you get there, there is a lot of struggle. Can you just talk to this point? I mean, obviously mindfulness in your book, there's a lot of that in here because that's the state of the world right now, right?
Yeah. In many spiritual traditions, the lotus flower is often a metaphor for enlightenment. And the beauty of a lotus flower and why it's such a useful metaphor is that a lotus flower grows from mud. Without the mud, without the muck, without the ickiness, without the nastiness, there would be no beautiful lotus flower of enlightenment. And so the difficult work, like the messiness, the pain, the sorrow, that's actually the stuff that we work with. It's necessary in order to transform and grow this lotus flower. And so I like to remind my students of that and to think about moments in their life where they have transformed, suffering into joy, because all of us have those experiences. But then again, to recognize that the pain, the mud that we face is not the sum total of our existence, right? The Buddha said that there is suffering in life. He did not say life is only suffering. There's also joy in life. And so I think that that practice always has to be both about sorrow and about joy, about remembering the things that really truly make us happy, about remembering our capacity for happiness, and about recognizing our capacity to transform suffering. And so I think that that becomes the place where we can actually really recognize our own agency, our own freedom as spiritual practitioners.
Is that something that comes up for you with your own students, whether it's in the class or in yoga? Do students often say, "But I'm struggling. I have this, I'm worried about my life or myself or the future."
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And that's where we can draw on the strength of the community to talk about those things. I think one of the things that can be most frustrating about worry, about anxiety, is when it feels like we're alone in that. But in fact, if we talk as a community, we'll recognize that we actually share a lot of the same fears, a lot of the same worries, but we also share a lot of the same hopes and a lot of the same dreams. So we're standing on common ground and we can work together to support each other, to care. So I try the best that I can to reassure my students that they're not alone. And then also to help them recognize that there are, I don't know, there's a healthy amount of suffering that we really can work with and manage. But sometimes we have so much suffering, so much trauma that it's beyond my scope of practice as a meditation teacher or as a professor. And I'm going to try my best to help my students get connected to professionals who really work in those areas that can help them in those moments when things are particularly acute. So I have found myself walking students over to the counseling center, a couple times a semester. Actually, a student will stay after class and they're really upset, and we'll talk for a little while, and I'll be there for them, and then I will make sure that they get the help that they need.
Mm, that's beautiful. And I think again, I think it's like it's a gift, right? You can in the beginning, but anyway, I said you must be a great teacher. I can,
Oh,
like the fact that you have this, your teaching is rooted in a practice
yeah,
that like you embody it, and I think that's like it's such a gift. And I don't know, maybe it's different for you, but when you have been doing it for decades, you like
sure.
it starts to you like yoga is a living like it is the way you live yoga.
Yeah,
It's not just going to the gym and doing an asana practice. It's a lifestyle. It is
the
the
way
way
of
of
life.
living, a
Yeah,
conscious living, and
yeah,
it extends across all aspects of your life. It doesn't just happen in the first 5 yoga classes. it's
right.
it's decades of honing, and so that it naturally just filters out into everything you do from a place of
Yes.
loving awareness and compassion, as you clearly
Mhm.
do with your students.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And as you clearly do as well. I mean, I can feel it across the screen. So,
Thanks. Thank you. You have this beautiful poem at the end of the book that you wrote
sure.
during when you were in the winter in the snow, and you tell that story. And I thought, oh wow, what's he going to say? And then you wrote this beautiful poem, and can you just share that? I mean, you obviously where where were you?
Yeah. So,
Because I live in Vermont, so I know how cold and snowy it gets in the mountains
yeah,
and stuff.
you know.
That's why I
Um,
could relate to it. I was like, oh, where is he? Or where was he?
I teach at Penn State University, which is in a small college town right in the center of Pennsylvania. So we're at the very top of the Appalachian Mountains, and it's we're in a valley between two different mountain ridges. Lots of trees here. It's a very beautiful, very, very, very beautiful place. Very rural. We joke that we're equally close to nowhere or everywhere, depending on your perspective.
That could be the same for where I live.
Yeah, probably true, actually. Yeah.
Except we have
And
no international airport.
oh, yeah, okay. But in this part of Pennsylvania, I think in a lot of the Northeast, actually, February can be a pretty cruel month in terms of we're ready for spring and the sun forgets to shine for maybe a couple weeks at a time. It was a couple of years ago. It was February. It was one of those periods where I don't think we had seen the sun for maybe 10 or 12 days. And, it's just, you feel the collective morale of the whole town just kind of collapsing in on itself when it's like that.
Sorry to interrupt you, but at
Yeah.
least we have skiing.
Right, right. And we do have a little ski mountain where we live, but we rarely get enough snow actually for it to, to function. And I found
Oh,
the key to winter is actually you have to get out in it. You have to go snowshoeing, go hiking, go jogging. Just like you just have to get out into it and it's better. One of my hobbies is I love trees. I've always loved trees, and so I do bonsai trees, some little trees in pots. And I've also planted a lot of Japanese maple, different varieties of those trees in my backyard. During COVID, I dug the entire backyard out and planted a pollinator garden, and then made a Japanese garden with trees as well. And it's a lovely meditation space. I mean, I always wanted that and made it. And but I was sitting inside, I was at my desk, I was probably answering emails, and just feeling this perpetual winter. And I looked outside at one of the trees that I had planted, and it had snow on it. And just in that moment, the snow started to melt and formed like a little droplet, and you could see the droplet get heavy from the branch and
mm,
then fall.
mm,
And like you're talking about moments of inspiration, right? In that moment, I wrote this little poem, and it's how I close the book. So the poem is called Hope. Snow melts from a tree branch. Someday soon it will be a cloud, and rain will fall on new leaves. There is spring and winter, and winter and spring. Take heart. And I really do. That was a moment where I saw spring in winter. And just like there is joy even in the midst of moments of sorrow. There is that drop that's going to fall from the tree branch, and it's going to get absorbed into the earth and evaporated back up. And in the middle of June, it's going to rain on me. And so there's June and February. Just like that drop later is going to become part of the ocean and get evaporated back up, and it's probably going to snow on you next year. Uh, so it's all so deeply, profoundly connected, which means that there's always hope.
What a beautiful way to end. Thank you. I love that.
Yeah,
Gorgeous.
thank you for having me. This was such a lovely conversation.
You're welcome. It was. Thank you. Thank you for this beautiful book. And I see you, was it your sixth book?
It is, yeah, and it's actually just because of the strangeness of publication timelines, I have another book coming out in a couple months. It's called Living Namaste, a
Ah,
practical guide to yoga, mindfulness, and building community. And it was written before this book was written, but took longer to come out. And it's a book that, is written for people on the yogic path, I think, but for anyone, of course, who's interested in this.
oh, let's come back and chat
So,
about that.
oh, I would love to.
I
I
love
mean, when we were
yoga.
talking about saying hello earlier, I have a lot of practices in that book. That book is every chapter has a practice, and there's a lot more personal stories in that book than this one.
Mm.
So there's a lot of me in that book. But yeah, these are my first books that are not academic books. So, academic books are really written for other academics, and maybe 10 people read them if you're lucky. And so it's
Don't
really
say that.
wonderful when a book is kind of out there and people are actually engaging with it.
Oh, that's great. Well, congratulations. And I
Thank
definitely
you.
look forward to Namaste. I love that.
Yeah.
Because there's so many,
Cool.
I'm not even going there's so much around Namaste in itself.
We'll talk
But
about that. It'll be
yes, yes,
lovely.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Okay, so where do we find you? Where can we get your books? And definitely give a plug for your yoga studio. And I wanted to ask you before, are they also online or are they just in person?
I have a website. We can put it up. I also have a Substack that I started called Zen and the Art of Democracy. And that's a nice place to connect. I've been posting some writings there, and our yoga studio is called Yoga Lab. You can find it at statecollegeyogalab.com, and there is an online library of classes. We did online classes during COVID, but after COVID, we mostly, I think actually completely have moved back to, being in the classroom. But I'm hopeful to be doing some retreats in the next year, in the Northeast. And so there'll maybe be some opportunities to connect with others in person, which I treasure and I love that.
Well, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to
Yeah.
chat to you, Jeremy.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day.
You too.